All right, so here we're going to be looking at how to solve a quadratic equation with graphing. So when we're looking at this, the first thing that we're going to want to do is very similar to what we were doing when we were solving a quadratic using the quadratic formula. We want our equation to look like the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's what we want it to look like. So when we look at step 1, it's going to be make your equation look like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You want it to look like that because that's really important for when you put it into the calculator. So the second step is that when you're looking at your calculator, you're going to have a y1 and a y2. So you're going to want your equation in y1 and then put 0 in y2. So first step, make your equation look like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Second step, put your equation in y2 and put 0, or put your equation in y1 and put 0 in y2. Then third step, go to the graph. That one's pretty easy. You just have to hit the graph button. And then this next one is going to sound, these next two steps actually are going to sound a little confusing until I show it to you. But you're just going to hit second calc 5, enter, enter, enter. So second calc 5, enter, enter, enter. And step 5, it's going to be move it over. And then you're going to hit second calc 5, enter, enter, enter. Now, let me show you what that looks like. So, when you go and put this, when you have an equation, you have x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So that's already in the form that we want it. That's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's how we want it. So, where we go from here is going to be to the calculator. So here, we're going to go to the y equals, clear out whatever's in there, and then we're going to go and we're going to press x squared minus 3x plus 2, because that's our equation, and we're just going to put that in y1. And then in y2, we're just going to put 0. And then that was step 2. Step 3 is go to the graph. So you just got to hit that graph button. And it's going to show you, there's our equation getting graphed. And it's going to show this red line there at 0, which is what's in y2. So from here, we want to draw this. So we have 0 right there. And then here we have, it looks a little bit like that, but we'll get to drawing it in a second. So what I was saying before, you hit second, and above this where it says trace, it says calc. So it says second calc 5. So when you press 5, it goes right to this intersect option. And then it's going to say, you're going to try to find the intersection between these two lines. And so here you're on that first line, enter. Here you're on the second line, enter. and it's going to ask you to guess, but you can just press enter. It's going to tell you that it intersects at x equals 1. So right there, it's intersecting at x equals 1 right here. And then what we want to do, we're going to hit second calc 5, then you move over, enter, enter, enter. It's going to tell you that we also intersect here at x equals 2. So if we're looking at this graph, it's hitting this at x equals 1 and x equals 2. So those are actually going to be our solutions of x equals 1 and x equals 2 are our solutions to this equation that's x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So those are our solutions because y is 0, which is this part, and these x's equal 0 at x equals 2 and x equals 1. And then we just have to graph that or draw it on this graph. So the idea is that then it's going through here and up, and it's going through here and up that way. You always want to make sure that your graph is going through the 2 points that you want it to, and then also making sure that the y-intercept is right too. So here, our y-intercept is 2, and here, our y-intercept is 2. So that's just always something to look out for too. Now, let's look at the next example. The next example is 5x squared minus 7x minus 2 equals 3x squared minus 4x. But now we want to get all the stuff on this side. We want to put it over to the other side. So to do that, we're going to subtract 3x squared, and we're going to add 4x to both sides. So we get 2x squared. And then if we're adding 4x to that side, we get minus 3x. And we still get minus 2. And then that equals 0. And then this is what we're going to graph. So we go back to our calculator over here. And we want to put in, clear out what we had before, put in 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. And that's the part that we're going to put into the calculator. And then we have y2 is 0, just like we did before. And then again, just go into the graph. And so it's graphed that, and now it's going to graph the y equals 0. Now we're just going to want to look at this. So again, what we say, second calc 5, enter, enter, enter. And that's going to give us that intersection point that it says x is negative 0.5. So we can write that down here with our solutions. X equals negative 0.5. We can also mark that right here on our graph. That's a little off on here, but you can make it a little more precise on your paper. And then we want to do that again. So we go to second calc 5. And then we got to move over to the other side so it's closer to where this point is. And go enter, enter, enter. And it tells us the intersection is at 2. So here, we can mark that on our graph. And then we see what our graph is going to look like. So then we can just write that x equals 2 down here where our solutions are. And then we can draw that. So we're trying to make our parabola there. Then We want to bring it down and bring it back up there. We want to make sure it's going through this 0.5. Mine's a little bit off. And look, going through the 2. So if we can move this a little bit to the side, there we go. That looks a little bit more right. So there we go. That's how you want to graph this equation and find your solutions, by graphing. So we still got 2 more examples. Let's look at this one. So here we have 4x squared minus 15x minus 8 equals 2x squared minus 8. So in order to get this how we want it, we want to subtract 2x squared from both sides. And we want to add 8 to both sides. So then we just end up with 2x squared minus 15x. Because if we add 8 to this side, 8 plus negative 8 is just going to be 0. And 4x squared minus 2x squared is just going to be 2x squared. So this equals 0. And then we go back to this calculator. So here, clear out what we had before. Then we have 2x squared minus 15x. That's all we have to put right there for that. And we have our 0 and y2. And now we're going to go look at the graph. So here it's going to graph that 2x squared minus 15x equals 0 equation. And it's going to show us this graph. So here, again, we're just going to go back to second, calc 5, enter, enter, enter. And it's telling us that our first solution is x equals 0, which means it's going to go through right there. Now we want to look at our other one. So we're going to go with second, calc 5, move it all the way over. Not all the way, but you want to make sure you see it. So it'll get there. Right there. So you want to make sure you see it close to that intersection point. Then you can hit enter, enter, enter. And it's going to tell you that that intersection is 7.5. So our other solution is x equals 7.5, which is going to be right about, nope, not there. Going to be a little bit more right there on our graph. And then we want this to look about what that is. So I want to come down from here. That wasn't a very straight line, but your graphs, when you're drawing them, don't have to be perfect. And it's going to be right back up here. That's kind of how you would draw that graph. So then we have the solutions x equals 0 and x equals 7.5 for this equation up here for example 3. And we just have one more example. That's example 4. And it's where we look at 4x minus 3 equals 2x squared. So to get to something that we want a little bit, that works a little bit better, we can subtract 2x squared from both sides. So in that case, we get negative 2x squared plus 4x minus 3 equals 0. And then just going right back to this calculator, we get y equals, clear out what we had before, y equals negative 2x squared plus 4x and we subtract 3, or yeah, to make it minus 3, and that is all we're going to put here in y1, and then in y2 it's still just 0. Go to graph it, and if we see here, you can see that this graph actually doesn't get to the y equals 0. So it's not going to have any intersection points. And so what that means is that we have no solutions. So here, where it says solutions, we write not just no solutions, but no real solutions. Because before, we talked about how we get imaginary solutions. So we can just write no real solutions here because at no point does this graph of negative 2x squared plus 4x minus 3, it never equals 0. So there's no solutions to this equation right here. But we can still draw it. So here we know that it crosses the y-axis right about there, and it peaks right about here. So we can draw our graph a little bit. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we can draw it like that. And then we have what we would write as an answer for this one, which is no real solutions, and a picture of our graph that way. So that's how you would approach this. And that is how you would solve a quadratic equation using graphs.